Hello everyone and welcome back to JAS Reviews. My name is James and today I'm going to be reviewing Bad Education, directed by Corey Finley and starring Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney. Now, Bad Education is about a superintendent named Frank Tassone who is very charismatic, very friendly, and runs this very successful high school named Rosalind. They are very high achieving, all their students do very well and get accepted to the most prestigious of colleges. And the school seems perfect, it doesn't seem like there's any problems with it, and that's just exactly how Frank likes it. That is until one of his workers, Pam Gluckin, is found to be using the school's funds in an illegal way, basically committing fraud. And she's used that money to not only pay for herself for expensive stuff, but to also get her family super expensive houses and things like that with the school's credit card. And this eventually leads on to this investigation by one of the school's newspaper students into the school's conduct and how they've been abusing their funds, and it basically starts this whole scandal. Corey Finley proved to be a very promising director with his debut film Thoroughbreds, which I really enjoyed. If you haven't seen that film, then you should totally go watch it. It's a great thriller film with two really good lead performances, and it's really well directed. So I was very excited to see what Corey Finley would do with his second film, and thankfully, Bad Education is excellent. Not quite as good as Thoroughbreds, but it is still a very good movie in its own right. Let's talk about what the movie did right, because there is a lot of things this movie did well. First of all, this movie really does excel in being a pretty good black comedy. There's a lot of pitch black humor in this movie. Some of it which is so subtle you would blink and you'd miss it, but it's honestly really clever, especially with what it's saying about the most corrupt aspects of the education system and sometimes how the education system shortchanges the kids and ultimately there's not many consequences for the people who screw them over. What also really helps this film is that Corey Finley has a good grasp on how to make his characters compelling. This is especially true of the main character Frank, played wonderfully by Hugh Jackman. I'll get into the performances in this film in a minute, but Frank is a very interesting character despite how corrupt you eventually see him to be. I like how the film slowly tears away Frank's facade. His friendly, charismatic self slowly becomes torn away piece by piece, and then you really see who the man is. You're still compelled by him, and you even feel sympathy for him. And that's mainly because of how the show does a good job at exploring his relationship with others, and the fact that he really does seem to care about being a good teacher. And there's almost a tragedy to the fact that Frank doesn't realize this. And the movie does a good job at highlighting this tragedy, especially in the ending scene where we see a part of Frank's character that we haven't really seen before. And we really see what he truly wanted, what his biggest desire was at the end of the day. Pam is also a really interesting character, the one who ultimately was the first to be discovered for committing fraud at the school. And even though her acts are also despicable, Corey Finley does a good job at showing why she did these acts. We can almost see things from her point of view. It's not like the movie entirely puts the blame on her either, which I appreciate. It sort of puts the blame on the system at large. I think her motivation might have been the most sympathetic in some ways. She was really wanting to do this for her family. She was wanting to make all this money, to use all this money to help her family out, to help them be successful. I think that's something that almost anyone could sympathize with, even if we don't agree with the way she went about it. And the fact that Corey Finley deftly balances making sympathy for the characters while also acknowledging that the acts they did were reprehensible and were wrong shows him to be really good at creating some complex anti-heroes. I always love a good anti-hero, especially in this movie landscape where anti-heroes can feel really cliched and really overdone. This movie has a refreshing take on them. Like I somewhat alluded to before, the performances in this film are excellent. I think the easiest, most obvious highlight is Hugh Jackman as the main character. He disappears into this role, he really dedicates to it. I love how he shows all the facets of this very complex character, and he does a good job of making you alternately feel bad for the character as well as hating him. because I felt both emotions in the movie at different times. He's just a really interesting character and one of the better movie characters I've seen in 2020. So props to Hugh Jackman for putting on what is one of the best performances of the year so far. Allison Janney is also really good. I think she provides an excellent counterpart to Hugh Jackman. My only issue is that I wish I'd seen these two characters together more. You could really feel the chemistry of them, especially in this one really good scene where they're sitting together on a school bench. They have such an intriguing chemistry that is pretty unique, and I wish that the movie had capitalized on it even more in some ways, but those scenes with them together were definitely some of the biggest highlights. Ray Romano, though he isn't in this movie as much as I thought he was going to be, is a really good supporting character, and I think he's actually one of the funniest characters, if not the funniest, in the show, because he just has a good way of showing off some subtle, subdued humor. You can so easily crack up at his jokes because he delivers them with such sharp and quick-witted timing, which is really what this movie feels like too, sharp and quick-witted. So Ray Romano was a perfect choice to play this character that's trying desperately to hide everything and to make the school still look good. Visually, this movie does a pretty good job at using lighting to indicate its moods. I especially like how the movie was filmed in this really dark blue hue that makes everything feel really dark and really gritty, which is what this film needed for its pretty dark subject matter. There's some really cool stylistic choices this film makes, especially in its ending moments, that I thought worked really well. There aren't that many weaknesses to this film, but if there was one that I was going to emphasize on the most, I do wish that the movie had talked a little bit more about Rachel, the newspaper student at Roslyn, who was writing the article about the school's scandal. In fact, in some ways, it would have made sense to give her an even bigger role in the film and to see more of her process and maybe how she had to be more clever about navigating the school systems and being clever about interviewing teachers and stuff, especially those who were privy to the scandal. What the movie did do with her was still interesting to me, but I do wish they had emphasized on it a little bit more in some ways. Also, I do think that there are parts of the film where maybe the satire could have been ramped up even a little bit more, but I did understand why they kept the satire mainly low-key. I could tell that was mainly Corey Finley's intention, especially because the satire was more meant to emphasize some of the tragic elements of the film and some of the elements that he was wanting to have the most commentary on. And thematically, at the end of the day, the movie does work. So yeah, Bad Education is a really great movie. I enjoyed almost every aspect of it. I think the performances were great. I think that the movie was pretty funny. And I think it did a really good job at telling a story that was really intriguing to watch. And the movie did a great job at highlighting this commentary about how higher-ups are often exempt from consequences and the people who suffer don't deserve to suffer. For all those reasons, I'm going to give this movie a very strong 4 out of 5 stars, one of my favorites of the year so far, and I recommend that you go and see it. So, what are your thoughts on Bad Education if you have seen it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Once again, my name is James. I do reviews of both music and movies, as well as the occasional commentary piece. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then please feel free to like this video and to subscribe for future content. And until then, I will see you all in the next video.